Drawing the Bible. I'm Steve Thomason, and I am an artist, a seminary professor, and a pastor. And every Thursday at 2 o'clock, I go live here in my studio, inviting you to join me for 1 hour of doing some drawing and studying the Bible together. So it's going to be super fun. This whole summer, I've been doing this as a weekly thing. As a part of my big summer project, which is to illustrate the book of Acts as a graphic novel. And I'm doing this for a couple different reasons. One is because I've done all 4 of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, as graphic novels. And that's been super fun over the last, I've done one a year for the last 4 years. And so this year I'm doing Acts. And I am doing a course for Faith Lead Academy this year, which will be released hopefully sometime after Easter next year. And so this graphic novel that I'm working on right now will be kind of the basis for that course. So I'm super excited. And this live stream session is simply a drawing session. So I'm without any further ado, I am going to switch over to my drawing scene in my live stream studio and show you what I've got going on. So I've been working all day on this project, and now it's 2 o'clock, and so I'm inviting you to kind of look over my shoulder and see what we're doing. We're going to be doing some drawing today, and this drawing is what we call the tight pencils of the page. So here's the deal. When you're making a graphic novel, after you've written the script, that's the first thing, is write the script. After you've written the script and you've laid out how many pages you're going to have, the first thing you want to do is pencil the pages. And in the penciling phase, there are 3 stages. First is you just lay out the page with all of the panels. So you can see here in Comic Draw, I've got all the panels laid out. And the cool thing about this app called Comic Draw is that it lets you, it does all the, you can do all the graphic layout, like the texts and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty sweet. So you lay out the panels, and here, let me turn off these layers so you can just see what it looks like when you just have it in panel layout. So first of all, you lay out with the panels and the word balloons and everything. You get that just the way you want it. And then you go down to your sketch layer. And what I like to do is I draw in the panels on the sketch layer, and then you do what is called the rough phase. At least this is my method. And so I go through each panel. Let me bring up the opacity on this rough, and I do like super rough layout. So you can see, I mean, like these are so just super gestural, quick layouts, just to get the composition and the flow of the page. And you can see, like on this panel, you can barely tell what's going on here, but I can tell what's going on. And it's just enough information to kind of, to map out the whole page. And so I go through all of the pages like that. And then I go through and I go in and I do tight pencils. And so that's what I'm going to be working on today. And I've already started the tight pencils. So I bring my rough down to maybe like 40%. Now look at the difference here. If I turn off the tight, you can see I just have like super quick, like there's a quick little egg shape for the head. But then when I go in and I tighten it up, now you can tell, oh, those are 2 Roman soldiers and that's Paul. Now, if you've been tracking with me and paying attention, you can tell that there's something different about Paul in this drawing. Now we are in Acts chapter 21, verses 27 through 36. So in order to know why Paul has a bald head, let me tell you why. Because what happens right before this, let me go to the panel layout. And if I go to the page just before this, you can see that Paul, he's finished his journeys up in Greece, his second time through Achaia and Macedonia, and he has this tearful goodbye. Oh, let me show you the tearful goodbye because it's kind of heart-wrenching. This is a great story. So he leaves, he goes to the city Troas, and here's the story where Eutychus, the young boy, is in the window and he falls asleep, and poosh, he falls 3 stories to his death. But Paul comes down and brings him back to life. And then Paul goes on talking, blah, 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 all the way till morning. It's actually a really funny story. And I know it's really interesting why it's included in Acts, but it is. And so then he goes from Troas down. He's sailing past Ephesus. Now remember, he spent like 2 years in Ephesus. But he doesn't want to be in Ephesus because there's lots of controversy there. That was where the big riot in the arena was, if you remember that from last week. So he meets the elders of Ephesus on the shore of Miletus, and he gives them this big speech. And then they pray together, and then they have this really tearful goodbye. And he tells them to be good shepherds. It's a beautiful scene because he knows he's going to go and he's probably going to have a lot of persecution, which he does. So he sails from Miletus to Tyre, and then he heads down. He hangs out in Caesarea with Philip and Philip's daughters. And then this prophet named Agabus comes from Judea and prophesies that Paul is going to be arrested. So Paul, he doesn't care. He goes to Jerusalem anyway. So James, who is the head of the church in Jerusalem, he tells Paul, like, look, there's thousands of Jewish believers here. That means Jewish people who are disciples of Jesus. There's thousands of them in the city of Jerusalem. And they are followers of the law of Moses. It's super important to them because they're Jewish people. And that's awesome. And so Paul is a controversial character because he has been traveling around in Gentile regions, meaning people who are not Jewish, and preaching the good news of Jesus and telling people that they don't have to become Jewish in order to be disciples of Jesus. And that's a problem for some of the people in Jerusalem. So James says, just to show these folks that you haven't abandoned your Jewish identity, take these 4 guys, go to the temple, and do this rite of purification where they have to shave their heads. So they shave their heads and they do 7 days of purification. And that's where our story picks up this week. And so I have already roughed out, this is an exciting moment because I've roughed out all the rest of the book where Paul is arrested and he goes, he's in Caesarea for 2 years, 3 different leaders. There's this big shipwreck, and he finally ends up in Rome. And this is the final page. So super exciting. All right, enough of that. We're here to draw, and we're gonna have some fun. So that is why Paul is bald. And what's going to be fun over the next couple pages is as time progresses, I'm going to grow his hair out. So be able to track time with his hair. So that's awesome. So if you're with me live on YouTube or on Facebook, just know that you are welcome to leave a message in the chat box if you have any questions, or if you just let me know that you're watching. Just say, yo, hey, how's it going? Put that in the chat and I can see it, and that'd be awesome. So let's go down now to our sketching level. So I'm on my tight pencil phase. And so what I've done so far is, after 7 days of purification, now these leaders right here, they are actually the religious leaders from way back in Asia, or Antioch Pisidia and Ephesus, that area. And they're the ones who have been chasing Paul all over the world, trying to cause trouble for him and stop him, because they think that what he's doing is really wrong. So they drag him out of the temple. They accuse him of defiling the temple by bringing Gentiles in there, which he didn't actually do. And they want to kill him. So there's this big mob. They're trying to kill him. And so the Roman tribune, who's a leader of the fortress of Antonia that's attached to the temple, he intervenes. And so here he is, seeing what's going on, and he and his soldiers, they apprehend Paul. They put him in chains, and then they're like, who is this? And then the mob is just shouting to the point where he can't understand anything. And then they just attack him. And so what we're going to draw right now is The mob is so intense that the soldiers actually have to carry Paul out to safety. So what's really interesting about these scenes is Paul's relationship with the military in Rome, because they actually save his life. Rome saves Paul's life. And like, what do we do with that theologically? I don't know, but I'm just drawing the story. So here we go. What I need to do is figure out what I've got here is 3 soldiers and Paul. So we're going to do a little bit of physics here. So first I'm going to draw like his hand. Now I should be having music playing because I may stop talking for a while. And I've got some music. Yeah, you should be hearing the music. Let me pull it up just a little bit. All right, so enjoy the music. So now I've got to think about the physics of so I've got this soldier, like he's lifting, so sometimes I have to remember which side the thumb goes on. Get my eraser over here. Alright, so this is like his shoulder. Now he is still bound. So his arms, and he's tense, right? So I want to draw his hand. So there's Paul. His hands are bound like that. So he's got shackles around his wrists. And again, these are pencils, so I don't have to be super, super tight with this because I'm going to come back and ink it and make it really clean. But I need to have enough information so that when I come back to ink, I haven't forgotten what I'm trying to do here. So what I've got here is Paul is turning his head and kind of looking back at the tribune. Like, what's happening to my life right now? So it's been 7 days, so he should have like a little bit of a shadow, but not hair or a beard yet. And so I've got his rib cage is going to be kind of sagging down here, and then I've got another soldier here who is holding like right on his pelvis. So that's going to be his butt, right there. This guy's going to be maybe a little shorter, so his arms are going to be straight. And then this guy's going to have his hands kind of on Paul's, like his calves. So we'll make this foot kind of dangling down a little bit. Now remember, he's also shackled on his feet. So if that's his foot, then he's going to have a shackle like that. And we'll make this foot kind of going up. So then I want to make the shackles like that, and then I'm gonna make the chain like it's flipping up because he's being bounced around. Probably do that with that chain too. I'll just leave that. So I'm gonna make his robe kind of flapping around. Maybe make it flap up on the other side. Bring his shoulder up like that. Yeah, there we go. So there's Paul, and he's being carried away. Oh, hey, I got a question from Joseph. Hey Joe, how many layers do you end up using for each page? Rough, type, pencil, and then color? Yeah, so what's interesting, Joe, great question, man, thanks. I do the penciling in Comic Draw, and so there's a layer for rough, there's a layer for the panel, then a layer for rough, and then a layer for tight. But then what I do when I go to the ink and color it, I actually do that in Procreate. And so there's a whole nother layer above the sketching layer where I actually do, for each panel, I do like a mini multiple layer document within each panel. So I have a background, I have an ink layer, solid color layer, and then a shading layer. And then so there's like 4 or 5 layers for each panel. So, and then you multiply that by like 8 panels. Sometimes there can be 40 to 50 layers inside of one page document. Ultimately, this becomes a Photoshop document, or it's where I do the final touches. So hope that answered your question, Joe. I'm glad to see got somebody on the chat. That's awesome. Okay, so let's see. So I don't follow my rough sketch. Sometimes I make changes because I realize that my physics will look better if I have this character, like his chest way out here, and I'm going to have his face down like this, and then this arm's just going to be back here. Turn that music down just a little bit. And this is where lots of figure drawing comes into play, to know anatomy and how to draw the anatomy from different angles. So that's enough for that soldier. So then I got this soldier who, let's make this guy really stout, big dude. He's right in the middle. Make his like no neck, his pec. So they have the Roman uniform on, right? So these are his pectoral plates. So oblique plates. And then, let's see. So the final layer is the most detailed. Yeah, that's right. The final layer. It's like with most art, like if I'm doing an oil painting or something, you start really loose, just super loose and sketchy, and then each new layer that you do, you get more and more refined, just bringing in the details. And that's typically how most art that I do, anyway, illustration is done. It's how I do oil painting. It's how I do most illustration. And one of the things that I notice, like with young artists, is they start drawing and they want every line they make to be their final line. So they're trying to be super perfect from the beginning. But you really need to start super loose. And that's why digital art is so awesome, because you can do multiple layers and it doesn't matter how loose you are. Because check this out. If I just make the rough layer disappear, that's a fairly nice pencil drawing that then I can ink. So the inking layer, I would then take this tight pencil, and make it super light, like lower the opacity, and then I do a nice clean ink line over top of that. And in the coming, like next week, I will be inking, because this week I'm going to be finishing up all of the pencils. So I'm super excited about that. So next week, if you tune in to our Drawing the Bible, whether you're with me live or you watch it later, you're going to get to watch the inking and the painting process, which that's pretty cool. Okay. So now we got one more. Let's, I'm going to make this soldier kind of looking back at his boss and be like, what are we doing? So center line of his head there, his jaw, his neck. So his ear plate is going to be right there. His head like that. Give him, and I'm going to make his, so he's going to be like, his hand is up here. There. So I got 3 soldiers carrying him out, and now I've already noticed that I have a problem in my proportions. So I'm going to go back to my rough. I'm going to grab this free select tool, and you see the distance I have from the distance I have from his head to his hand is a little too close. So I want to move that out. Come back up to my tights. And there. So this is my it's going to be this guy. So see the basic shape. What I try to do is make distinctive head shapes for key characters so that I don't forget. Oh, you're welcome, ELB. You guess you're in the right direction, still learning. Hey, yeah, reach out if you have any specific questions about how things work. So let's see. Head shape. And see how over here I kind of have the same head shape. So this guy's got really dominant cheekbones. So let's come over here. So, and he's got a really long nose. And he's giving the order to get this prisoner out of here. So he's shouting. And I'm pretty loose with my cartooning style. I have a fairly gestural kind of way of drawing. I just realized that that head is a little too big, because he's a little further back in the scene, so that's good. It's another thing I love about digital art is you can just cut and paste and move things around. Okay, so his shoulders are like that, his neck. So what I try to do is get the proportions of the arms and everything correct. Not correct, I mean, it's a cartoon, right? But at least somewhere in the realm of believable. And the cool thing about like having Roman soldiers with capes is that they can give great animation to the scene. And so he's just saying, get this prisoner out of here. So he's kind of rising up above the fray. And so what I've got now is those are the key characters that you want to have some definition to, because they're what is really the point of the story. And then everybody else, then the challenge, I've got so many crowd scenes. And to be honest, I really struggle with crowd scenes because I'm impatient and I don't like to draw that. No, I love to draw. I don't like to draw that many heads, and so I really do like a shorthand with crowds, and then every once in a while I pop in a face. So first let's just put in some heads, a little bit more than just the squiggly lines that I've got. And so one thing that you do with these head shapes is you give perspective, so you can see that the heads down here are bigger because they're closer to you. LB, this program is amazing. The fact that you're able to resize instead of starting over. Yeah, oh my goodness. Yeah, you are so correct. Digital art, I don't know how I ever did it before that. I actually switched to, I switched my studio to digital in 2002. And I have been drawing on some form of a digital tablet ever since then. In Photoshop, I used to do a lot of my work in Corel Painter, which is an amazing program. That's what I started on when I was using a PC, and I was using a Wacom Intuos tablet, which that kind of tablet you look at your screen and you draw on just an opaque tablet. And Painter was amazing. It's really what I learned on that and Photoshop. And then in 2012, I got my first iPad. And oh man, I started using Procreate right away. It was actually at a Best Buy store I was in, just looking to see what kind of accessories, and one of the clerks at Best Buy said, "Hey, have you tried Procreate?" And I thought he was kind of being rude, but then sorry, bad joke. It's like, actually I have 4 children, but Procreate's the name of really the best art app for the iPad, and it's exclusively for the iPad. And I started using that, and it is a game changer. So much fun. But you have to have an Apple Pencil to use that. And so I started doing a lot of my work actually on the iPad. And so from 2012 until just last year, actually, I did a lot of my work on the iPad. And I've actually done all of my graphic novels on the iPad. I discovered the Comic Draw app back in 2017, and which is the app I'm working in right now, and it is phenomenal. And you can actually do you can do the inking and the painting and everything in Comic Draw. But because I had used Procreate for so long prior to Comic Draw, I'm actually more comfortable with the inking and painting features of Procreate. But to be able to use them both together and then to use them, oh, you remember Painter too? Yeah, that's great. It's still, I think it's still around. All right, I gotta take a drink. Doing a lot of talking. All right, so these 4 panels tell the story of verses 27 to 36. So the soldiers take Paul out. They take him into the barracks. And just before they take him in, Paul says to the tribune, his name is Claudius Lysias. He says, "Hey, can I say something to the people?" And he's speaking in Greek. And Claudius is like, you know Greek? So you aren't the Egyptian leader of assassins? See, Claudius thought that he was dealing with a notorious criminal that they had been looking for, that Paul was this guy from Egypt. He's like, no. He says, Paul's like, I'm a Jew. I'm from Tarsus. And Claudius is just really intrigued by Paul. And so Paul says, let me speak to the people. So I got to draw that. So this is just a very different. So I'm going to start with Paul. This should be pretty quick. And again, this is Paul with the shaved head. So I have a basic shape that I use for Paul's head. Which was an interesting challenge when I suddenly realized, oh man, I've got to make him bald, because his beard has always been such a distinguishing part of who he is. And we all look radically different when we, those of us who have facial hair. Like my kids tell me, don't ever shave your face. I did that once when they were little and they thought a stranger was in the house, and oh my goodness. And so I haven't. I've had my beard for I've had my beard for 35 years. That's crazy. All right. So he's still being held by the soldiers. LB, I think this is the end of Acts. Yep, it's chapter 21 actually, and there's 28 chapters in Acts. So we're getting very close to the end. This begins Paul's season of imprisonment. Okay, so there we go. And so I'm just going to have like an indication. There's some legend about Paul that he was a short man. And so we'll just have these two tall soldiers next to him. And they can just be like, they're not crucial to the story, and like that guy's face is behind the word balloon. So just an indication that they're there is what matters. And so this guy, though, Claudius, is got that distinctive. You're not. You're not that guy? That's what he's saying here. I see the scripture, LOL. Yeah. Yep. So what I try to do is I try to label the text so that people, my thought about these graphic novels is they're not word for word. I know there's another guy out there who's doing word for word comics, and he wants to make sure he includes every word, and you know, more power to him. That's not my intention. I see these as a reading supplement. Every text, every passage, I don't skip any passages, but what I'm trying to do, like up here, verses 27 to 36, these 4 panels are my visual storyboard of the story, and I put in key text, but I don't put in every word because that would be overwhelming. Okay. Now, I see that I got a little problem here with my layout, so I'm just going to grab him and move him over just a little bit like that, and I think that is a better layout. Okay, and then now it's let me show you how you can cheat a little bit. So because if you're doing pencils, so I'm going to highlight that, I'm going to copy it, come over here and hit paste, and then drag it over here, because it's basically the same scene. It's just a moment later. This is what we call like a dialogue panel where they're talking to each other, and so I'm just copy and pasting because, but zooming in, right? And so, but when I do that, notice it creates a new layer, and you have to remember that. So I have to come back down to my tight, and if I grab his head like that and copy it and paste it, now it's going to paste it in exactly the same spot, but if I bring it over here and zoom in, now I don't want to have the same expression on his face. So first thing I'm going to do is take these layers and click this and merge them down into the tight layer, because I don't want to lose track of what layer I'm on. Yeah, it's such a time saver. Thanks for tracking with me on this. Is fun. Okay, so first thing I want to do is erase. Let me make my eraser bigger. Just want to erase this outside of the panel like that. And again, I'm just doing pencils, right? So this is not the final drawing. This is still just, pencils are just information for the final art. I can keep Paul's expression pretty much the same, but I am going to change his expression just a little bit. Like maybe a little bit concerned. Oh, these are horrible eyes. Let's start those over, shall we? Yeah, we shall. Part of the problem is because I blew it up now, the lines are so much thicker that my thin lines, so I'm going to thicken up my lines so I just get a little bit of like sameness because it's throwing me off a little bit. I'm going to have him like maybe narrow his eyes a little bit. Like, what you talking about? Why would you want to do that? Let me speak to the people. He's curious, but he does do it. And so that's cool. Let's make sure I'm still on the tight layer. How are we doing for time? Good, we got 20 minutes left. Now, this big panel, one of the things throughout Acts is there's lots of big speeches in Acts. And so whenever there's a big speech, I try to do a big panel to show the scope of the crowd and to give space for all of the word balloons. And again, I'm not including every single word in the speech because that would just be too much text. And the whole purpose of these cartoonist guides is to be more visual and less textual. That's a hard word to say, textual. I laid in this really cool feature of Comic Draw is I laid in this this perspective grid. You can see you can move it around. That's pretty cool. And so now he's standing on the stairs of the fortress of Antonio, which is attached to the temple. And so Paul, his hands are still bound. So I'm going to draw his little baldish head and his big nose. And the smaller you make a head, the more just very simple it has to be. And so he's motioning with his hands, but he's bound up. So he has to hold his hands together like this. So they're bound up. And he's like, look. I always imagine Paul as a preacher that uses his hands. Probably because that's how I preach, and we tend to project ourselves onto people that we admire. So let's see. So here's Paul. Okay. He's still bound. When there's robes, I still, even if there's no like body movement, I still like to make the robes flow a little bit, because robes are fluid and it's boring if they're just standing still. So now what we've got is, oh my goodness, a whole nother level of crowd. So a couple things about the crowd. Let me get rid of these layers. So when you're on the sketch layer, you can make the lettering from on top. You can change the opacity, because sometimes you want to see it for composition and sometimes it just gets in the way. And in this moment, it's getting in the way. So here's my perspective point back here. I don't need to do much more with the building, because that, there's enough information here for when I ink it. I can ink it, and a lot of my information for my buildings actually comes from color. The way I paint it, I paint it like it's a loose squash painting, as like if I were doing my plein air gouaches. I like that style, but I'll talk about that later when I'm in the painting phase. So that's enough information really for the building. And I'm following my perspective lines like this. So I've got a little bit of a canted angle. So my horizon line is just slightly tilted. My steps are like this, and I'll get into that for in the inking phase. And then over here, just a couple, really just a couple lines to indicate the perspective. As the perspective goes out like that. Jerusalem's in the background. Mountains, okay. And that's probably mostly going to get covered up. But so I'll paint all of that. But here's the thing: if I've got this big crowd just filling this open space, and so the crowd, the lines of the body have to follow the perspective lines, and so the heads. Basically, what I want to do is just get contours of heads and body directions that follow the perspective. And you don't want to, I don't want to be super detailed in the crowd shots because that's not where I want the viewer to be focused. The speaker, Paul the speaker, is the focus. And the point of all of this information is just to show that there's a huge crowd. And so when I paint this, I will use colors and highlights to really mark out the differences. But for now, I'm just trying to do random shapes of heads, but mostly to just put them into, to follow the perspective. And so like the edge, the contour of the crowd, the heads get smaller as they're further away. And the further away you are, the less and less detail there is. And so now I'll just put in some lines, and that's enough information so that when I come back to ink this, I'll probably do most of this with color. So now if I bring my words back up, yeah, see, like this whole area around this third balloon is going to be mostly covered with the word balloon anyway. So now we're coming to the crowd's response to Paul. And so what I chose to do was a bird's eye view where you're looking down on the faces of the crowd. And so you've got this extreme perspective, partly because it's fun to draw it that way. And that way you can see the faces of the crowd as they are looking up at Paul. And they're angry. They want him to die. So this is very reminiscent. Because remember, this is the same place where they shouted, this is the same place and probably the same crowd that were shouting, "Crucify him," for Jesus in Jerusalem. So it's an angry crowd. So now I have a perspective challenge where, so when I'm drawing people in extreme perspective, I want to imagine where their feet are, and then I draw up through their body. So Paul's feet are planted just like that. This is all stuff you're not going to see, but I have to figure out where these things are. So Paul's chest, his spine's going like that. His chest and his shoulders are kind of hunched forward because he's bound up. And his neck and his head is going to be looking down at the crowd. Center line like that. Ear like that. And then his robe like that. And so now I can just erase all this information because it was just like an under wiring for the sculpture, if you will. And here's where I get to put the shadow of his hair. And then we want to show an indication of the steps that he's standing on as it goes down to the crowd. Whoops. As it goes down to the crowd. Another cool thing is you just double tap for undo. Digital art, man. Okay. So these bodies are all extreme perspective as well. And so what matters here is a couple key faces that have murder in their eyes. And these are the leaders that have chased Paul across the Mediterranean Sea. And they've tried to kill him before. They've left him for dead before. And this guy just won't die. And they're so frustrated. And so yeah. Now, I chose to put stripes in their hats as the way to identify them. It's completely arbitrary. It's not based on any biblical knowledge or archaeological research. I just chose to mark them off in that way. And to draw his hand, his fist coming up in perspective. Like, you must die. Rah. These guys are mean. And I also have them with dark stripes down the front of their robe. So there's one. And let's make another one. Just kind of fun to make up faces. Again, to emphasize this guy's gonna be like his arms like down by his sides in defiance and anger. I guess you're taking liberties too. Yep. Absolutely. I'm just trying to have fun, actually. I love the Bible. I love the stories of Scripture. I've grown up with them. I think they hold the words of life, and I just want people to enjoy reading them with these. Okay, so there's two really murderous characters, and so I can start getting less concerned about details and get more and more loose as I go through this crowd. I'll put a couple of angry women in there. Don't want the guys to have all the fun, right? And when I go back into the, when I do the painting of this, I do a lot of details of the crowd with my paint because it gives a really cool, just a soft detail. I don't do like sharp ink lines for everybody in the crowd because that's too much information. I only ink the things that are in sharp detail and are important parts of the information. So like there you go, like there's my crowd. Boom. That gives you enough information to know that this is an angry crowd that really does not want Paul to live. Oh my goodness, it's 2:56. You know what? We've got one more drawing to do. And so let me just crank this out really quick. This is Claudius is getting frustrated because he doesn't really know who Paul is. And so he does what any good Roman tribune would do. He wants to beat the truth out of him, you know. So he orders Paul to be flogged. And Paul plays the Roman citizen card on him because Paul is actually a Roman citizen, which most Jewish people were not actually Roman citizens. And Claudius is like, "You're a citizen? I had to buy my citizenship. How did you get it?" And Paul said, "Yeah, I was born with it, you know. I was born in Tarsus. My dad's a citizen." And so Paul doesn't get flogged because he's a citizen. It's pretty cool. He's like, "You're a citizen? Wow." So it's like Claudius just has increasing reasons why he is fascinated by Paul. And he ends up really wanting Paul to be okay. That is the weirdest looking thumb I think I've ever seen. Oh yeah. Oh man, we're getting right to the time, guys. Yeah, I'll finish this later. So hey, this was super fun. Thanks for hanging out with me. We're coming up on 3 o'clock, and we did it. Look at that. We penciled these two panels. Paul getting carried away, having this conversation with the Tribune, having the big speech, crowd being angry. So that is the process of doing tight pencils in Comic Draw, and pretty sweet. So, hey, thanks everybody for joining me. If you were with me live, and thanks for those LB and Joe and those who were actually chatting along. That was super fun to have you on this session. And if you're watching this later, that's awesome. That's how I usually watch people's live streams. But just know that you can always go watch these later and go to cartoonistbible.com/acts. And I've actually added all of the penciled pages onto the website already. So you can read through the pencils, and as I do the inking and painting, you can read those as well. So hey, thanks so much for being with me. I'll be here again next Thursday at 2 p.m. drawing the Bible.